Professor Namyong Lee's long commentary, Siron, Diagnosing National Security, through the Lee Jae-myung government's W1.3 trillion defense budget execution delay, Korea's 2026 defense budget has been finalized at roughly W66 trillion, an apparent increase in headline terms, with a structure presented as W46 trillion for force operation and W20 trillion for force improvement. The public will judge national capability not by whether we spend more on defense, but by whether the money flows when it is supposed to. In defense, punctuality comes before numbers. Once punctuality collapses, budget increases remain nothing more than figures on paper. In early January 2026, controversy erupted that roughly W1.3 trillion in defense expenditures had not been paid on time by year end. The government explained it as sequential execution during January, and the Ministry of National Defense stated that execution began on January 9th. This incident stamped one message into the public mind. The issue is not that the defense budget is insufficient, but what breaks first when the nation's cash flow is interrupted. Trust is not built with words. Trust is built with a timetable. What the public wants from the state is not a glamorous plan, but the fulfillment of promises. In defense, promises operate more brutally. A one-day delay in execution becomes a one-day delay in maintenance, a one-day delay in maintenance becomes a one-day delay in availability, and a one-day delay in availability is perceived as a gap in deterrence. Budgets are finalized on a one-year basis, but military capability moves on a mid to long-term structure. Legally, Korea's budget is drafted and confirmed according to a one-year fiscal year. The fiscal year begins on January 1st and ends on December 31st. Each year, the government prepares a budget bill, submits it to the National Assembly, and the Assembly deliberates and approves it. In other words, the legal force of the budget and the basic unit of expenditure operate in principle as an annual system confirmed every year. However, an annual budget does not mean annual projects. Defense procurement, performance upgrades, major maintenance, and facilities programs run on a long breathing cycle of design, contracting, delivery schedules, inspection, and acceptance. To manage that long cycle, the government sets out a medium to long-term fiscal framework each year through a national fiscal management plan extending 5 years or more. Defense, too, operates in parallel with a management framework akin to a 5-year mid-term defense plan that bundles force development and force operation. An annual budget is legal authorization, while a mid-term plan is the blueprint of capability. The problem emerges when the two disconnect at the cash flow level. If the annual budget passes, yet year-end execution funds fall short and payments are delayed, the mid-term plan may look intact on paper, but the field shakes immediately. This controversy shows that failure in defense begins not in the planning document, but in the cash allocation sheet. The concepts of force operation costs and force improvement costs must be clarified. Force operation costs are the money that makes the military move today. The core includes expenses that allow units to train, operate equipment, conduct maintenance, contract for meals, secure fuel and parts, and sustain soldiers' welfare and essential operations. Put simply, it is the cost of maintaining the temperature of current combat power, and when it is delayed, readiness drops immediately. Force improvement costs are the money that builds tomorrow's capability. They finance the long contractual chain that completes new weapons acquisitions, replacement of obsolete equipment, performance upgrades, R&D, and testing and evaluation, mass production and fielding. Put simply, it is the cost of building the skeleton of future deterrence, and when it is delayed, deliveries and fielding slip while contractual trust collapses. The differences are reflected in both character and damage. Delays in force operation costs reduce today's training days, maintenance operating rates, and equipment availability, thereby lowering the quality of combat power. Delays in force improvement costs shake the contracting ecosystem, driving price increases and more conservative delivery conditions and postponing the completion of future capability. The fact that the 2026 budget is structured around W46 trillion for force operation and W20 trillion for force improvement means the state has already acknowledged the assignment of managing today and tomorrow at the same time. The essence revealed by the W1.3 trillion execution delay is a break in cash flow. The core issue is not that there was no budget, but whether allocation and payment were made on time. Defense does not function merely because a budget document has passed. Units and agencies can sign contracts, procure parts, run maintenance, and execute training as planned only when funds are actually allocated and paid. An explanation has been offered that year-end expenditures concentrate, temporary shortages may occur within allocation procedures, and sequential execution in January of the following year is customary. But in defense, the phrase customary easily becomes a dangerous rationalization. Force operation and force improvement are not categories meant to tolerate routine delays. They are core public goods for which the state must guarantee punctuality first. Moreover, defense spending has layered stakeholders. Units endure by reducing training or postponing maintenance. Defense firms face immediate cash flow shocks. Subcontracting networks absorb cascading impacts. More fatal than the delayed W1.3 trillion itself is the learned expectation that the state may not pay on time. That learning effect becomes the seed of national trust erosion. The field absorbs quietly, but combat power is quietly shaved away. Frontline units have weak voice, institutionally constrained collective action, and structural difficulty in exposing problems externally. As a result, the field absorbs shocks internally rather than visibly. It endures by postponing training, deferring maintenance, delaying consumable replacement, adjusting outsourced maintenance, and trimming plans. The danger of this method is that nothing big seems to happen right away. Defense is more dangerous precisely because it is hard to see before an accident occurs. What is visible is the debate over pay, but what collapses in real readiness is the maintenance operating rate, equipment availability, procurement lead time, and the quality of ammunition and parts inventories. Therefore, this issue must be handled not in the language of emotion, but in the language of operations. Defense performance is not the number of events held, but availability and reliability. The state's responsibility must be proven not by the total budget size, but by a system that guarantees execution punctuality to the end. Defense contracts run on trust, and when trust breaks, unit prices rise. Defense firms calculate risk premiums the moment delivery schedules and payments wobble. The more a firm contracts with a state that delays payments, the higher the cash flow risk, and that risk is easily passed back into price and delivery terms. In other words, the moment the state delays payment, defense must endure either higher prices, later delivery, or both. The damage is not limited to large prime contractors. Subcontracting networks shake, parts supply is delayed, skilled technical personnel leave, and promising small and medium firms move to other markets. Once the defense industrial ecosystem internalizes the expectation that the state pays late, that expectation easily hardens into a high-cost structure. The state losing trust as a contracting state is not a minor administrative error. It is a structural rise in national security costs. Defense is not propaganda. Defense is a contract, and the core of a contract is punctuality. Within the 2026 single-year budget, what the state must embed is automaticity and audit traceability. First, a system firewall is needed to separate force operation costs and key force improvement expenditures from year-end liquidity adjustments. At minimum, payments for core operating items such as training, maintenance, meals, fuel, and parts, and payments for key acquisition programs with high delivery risk must be codified under automatic allocation or priority allocation rules. It must shift from "we pay if needed" to "we pay first by principle." Second, the entire execution process must be designed to be fully audit traceable, from budgeting, allocation, disbursement, contracting, inspection to payment. It must be immediately clear where the pipeline is blocked, and those records must be verifiable by stakeholders. Operations with records run on responsibility, not manipulation. Third, the evaluation framework for the 2026 budget must shift from a total amount focus to a punctuality focus. For defense to become stronger, when it was executed must come before how much was allocated, and responsibility must be assigned to the organizations and procedures that break punctuality. The political fight must be over the structure of delay, not the word unexecuted. If debate stays only on whether pay was delayed, it ends in emotion. If pay is normal, people conclude there was no problem. If pay is delayed, it ends as an accusation of incompetence. But the real danger in defense accumulates quietly when operating funds and contract payments are delayed. What politics must do is not shake words, but expose structure. It must fight over what item was delayed, by how much, until when. Whether the delay occurred at allocation, payment, or contracting. What operational decisions the field made because of the delay, and which readiness indicators worsened as a result. The public does not owe the state only sacrifice. The state must repay with promises and trust. If the 2026 defense budget has expanded to around $66 trillion, the government's duty is to change the system so that it becomes a budget that flows on time. If it is not fixed now, the next crack will arrive more quietly, more largely, and more dangerously. Citizens, I hope Korea advances into a world-class national security and defense industry. Thank you for watching Professor Namyong Lee's long commentary.